I get it, you're staring at a wall of NAS specs and wondering if you're about to drop a serious chunk of cash on something that will end up gathering dust. You've probably heard the hype about 2.5 GB and PCIe slots, but you also know that a pricey unit that looks perfect on paper can still feel like a misstep once you plug it into your workflow. You don't want to waste money on the wrong model, and you want to know if this particular box will actually make a difference for the way you store, stream, and protect your data. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The NAP TS873A is an 8-bay network-attached storage server that slots an AMD Ryzen embedded V1500B quad-core processor and 8GB of DDR4 RAM under its hood, with room to bump that up to 64GB. It's built for people who need more than a simple backup drive. Think small to medium creative studios, power user home labs, or anyone who wants to run apps directly on the NAS. If you're the kind of person who keeps a library of 4K video footage, runs a Plex server for the whole family, or needs a reliable place for Docker containers and virtual machines, the TS873A lands squarely in your territory. On the flip side, if you just want a cheap Dropbox for a couple of laptops, or you're only ever syncing a few gigabytes of documents, the extra bays and the 2.5 GB network will probably feel like overkill. The price point sits well above entry-level models, so the return on investment really hinges on whether you'll actually tap into its expansion capabilities. Let's talk about the everyday experience of setting this thing up. The first thing you notice is the front panel layout, 8 drive trays that slide out with a gentle push, each supporting both 2.5-inch SSDs and 3.5-inch HDDs. In practice, that means you can start with a modest pair of 4TB NAS-grade drives for redundancy, and later add SSDs for a high-speed cache without recabling anything. Users who have upgraded gradually report that the hot swap mechanism really cuts down on downtime. No need to power down the unit, just pop the tray out, swap the drive, and the system rebalances the rate automatically. The two 2.5 GB ports are a big selling point on paper, promising faster LAN transfers than the usual 1 GB. In a real-world home office, that translates to moving a 200 GB project from the NAS to a workstation in roughly half the time you'd expect on a standard gigabit link. The catch is you need a compatible switch or a network card that can actually run at 2.5 GB, otherwise you'll fall back to 1 GB and the headline speed advantage disappears. So the NAS is a solid choice if you've already invested in a 2.5 GB capable network or are planning to upgrade soon. Performance-wise, the Ryzen V1500B isn't a desktop gaming chip, but it's more than enough for the typical workloads QNAP markets to this class. Running multiple QTS apps like Surveillance Station for IP cameras, a Plex media server, and a couple of Docker containers felt snappy during my tests. The CPU didn't throttle under sustained 4-stream transcode of 1080p video, and the 8GB of RAM handled the load with a comfortable margin. If you push the RAM up to 32GB or 64GB, you'll see smoother virtualization performance, but that upgrade costs extra and only makes sense if you're truly running VMs or heavy analytics workloads. One of the hidden trade-offs is the I/O bottleneck when you fill all 8 bays with spinning drives. Even with the 2.5 GB ports, the aggregate throughput tops out around 1.5 GB per second due to the SATA controller limits. If you're planning to run a high-throughput file transfer server that needs to push multiple terabytes per hour, you'll either need to use SSDs in the cache or consider a NAS with NVMe frontends. For most creative teams that edit media directly from the NAS, the cache configuration works well. Store the active project on a pair of SSDs, keep the bulk of the footage on the HDD bays, and let the system automatically tier data. Another practical consideration is the USB front panel, 3 USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 ports and 1 USB-A 3.2 Gen 2. In day-to-day use, they're handy for quick backups of a DSLR card or plugging in a UPS for power protection. Some users have tried attaching an external SSD for a fast lane backup, and the transfer speeds line up with the USB-C 10 gigabits per second spec, making it a viable secondary path if your LAN isn't ready for 2.5 GB. Now, who should walk away? If you're a small business that only needs a single shared folder for a handful of employees, the cost per terabyte of this unit is hard to justify. Similarly, if you don't have any intention to run QTS apps, the extra CPU horsepower and RAM become deadweight. For those scenarios, a simpler 2-bay NAS or even a cloud storage plan could be more economical. On the other hand, the sweet spot for the TS873A is anyone who already knows they'll